Together, we drive most places, and we're in the car, and my wife will say, I'm hungry. She usually drives now. She's a better driver than I. And I can't see well at night because of my glasses, and we're driving, and she says, I'm hungry. So I start looking for something to eat. And we having this conversation, and then she says, show me, so what are the options? And then she asked me this question. She says, do you want to eat Mexican or Thai? And I say, yes. and she hates that. For me, it doesn't make a difference. Rice and beans or tacos? Which one is it? Thai or Mexican? Which one is it? Mountain or beach? Like I love both. I like Thai and I like Mexican. So there are some things in life you don't have to choose. Like you have to hold them in tension. And the passage that I want to share with you guys tonight, if you have a Bible, you can go there, is in Acts chapter 16. This is an evangelistic passage. This is a passage that is dripping with mission. This is Paul and Silas. They're in a jail. They have been beaten up. And in the middle of the night, this miracle happens where there's an earthquake and they are delivered, and the jailer and his family were baptized. It's an amazing and fantastic missional passage. So let me read for you a couple of the passages. I'm reading from the New Living Translation. It's Acts chapter 16 and verse 25. Let me read a couple of passages. Around midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. And the other prisoners were listening. And suddenly, there was a massive earthquake, and the prison was shaken to its foundations. Then all the doors immediately flew open, and the chains of every prisoner fell off. Verse 27, the jailer woke up to see the prison doors wide open. He assumed that the prisoners had escaped, so he drew his sword to kill himself. But Paul shouted to him, stop, don't kill yourself, we're all here. Verse 29, the jailer called for lights and ran to the dungeon and fell down trembling before Paul and Silas. Then he brought them out and asked, sirs, what must I do to be saved? Then they replied, believe in the Lord God, believe in the Lord Jesus, and you will be saved along with everybody in your household. And they shared the word of the Lord with him and all who lived in his household. There are two things in this story that you and I need to hold in tension. If we talk about mission, if we're talking about people who are far from God, if we're talking about people in this community that can use a dose of hope, there are two things that you need to hold in tension. Successful congregations in 2022 post-pandemic ministry have these things in common. Number one, Jesus and justice. Successful congregations hold these two things in tension. I sometimes hear one or the other side of the equation. I've been in churches that say, our job here is not to fix anybody. We don't care about what happens with racial profiling. We don't care about the fact that people are suffering in their lives. We would love to help them, but our job, we don't get involved in racial issues. We don't talk about injustice. We don't talk about any of that. Our job here is just to preach the gospel. As if the gospel was somehow separate from activity of good in our community. So just preach the gospel. Don't talk about any other stuff. Just talk about Jesus. And then there's another group that says, well, we just want to make sure we change systems and problems and vote people in and out and politics. And it seems to me that we're having this conversation that that go past each other. In this passage, where this whole family is saved, this passage is sandwiched in between two justice passages. And in the chapter before, there's this girl that was a slave, and when Paul took the demons out and delivered her, she was no longer a slave, and the people that owned her, this is an injustice. This is a social issue. This is a social justice problem. The people were so upset that they wanted to kill him. That's why he's in jail. This story is sandwiched between two stories about action in the community. It's not just about, well, here's Jesus. Well, I'm hungry. I know. My bad. I'm just here to talk to you about the love of God. How can somebody listen to the love of God if they're hungry? It's hard to listen to the love of God when my kid is in jail. It's hard to listen to the love of God when I'm addicted to drugs. It's hard to listen to the love of God when I cannot pay my rent. It's hard to listen to the love of God when I am constantly in a state of anxiety because of my mental health issues. And when somebody's depressed, we just tell them that you're depressed. The problem is that you don't pray enough. Like if you pray more and just listen to more Christian music, the depression will go away. But the problem is you. So that person now feels depressed and guilty. So you have to have these two things in tension. One of my favorite quotes from Ellen White is in The Mount of Blessings, page 136. Listen to what she says. A religion that leads men to place a low estimate upon human beings whom Christ has esteemed of such value as to give himself for them. A religion that will lead us to be careless. And then, do I have the marker? Here's the marker. And she says 3 words. She says 3 words. A religion that will lead us to be careless of human, make sure everybody sees, needs. Number 2, sufferings. And this is really interesting, the 3rd one. A religion that will lead us to be careless of human needs, sufferings, or rights. It's a spurious religion. I don't know what spurious means, but it's not good, right? You don't say like, man, that was a spurious food. This is what she continues to say. In slighting the claims of the poor, the suffering, and the sinful, we are proving ourselves traitors to Christ. It is because men take upon themselves the name of Christ while in life they deny his character that Christianity has so little power in the world. The name of Christ is blasphemed because of these things. So you don't have to choose between Jesus and justice. You don't have to choose between doing good in the community and talking to them about Jesus. But if we're going to be successful in 2022, in a post-pandemic world, this is the D. Needs, sufferings, and rights. Now, I want to share with you, this is one of my favorite charts. Let me go over here. One of my favorite charts about how Christianity in North America functions in 2022. Make sure I get the dates right. 1950s. 1950 to the 80s. The 80s to 2010. And then 2010 to today. How does evangelism work? Evangelism is just sharing Christ with a community, right? This is what evangelism is. So these are 3 eras. And there are 3 C's in each one of these areas. First era, this is the 1950s, is the era in North America of the huge crusade. Who became really famous in the 1950s? Anybody know? Tall guy from the South?
Billy Graham.
His name is Billy Graham. Filled stadiums. Filled in LA, there was, I think, like 1 million people, right? So, who is the target group? Is unchurched people. Who are unchurched people? These are people that have a memory of the gospel, who used to go to church but don't presently attend, who have a worldview that is largely Christian, even though they don't attend church. Like in the 1950s, if you got pregnant out of wedlock, even though if you didn't go to church, that wasn't seen very well in the community. So usually unchurched people didn't go to church. They're like, should I go to church today or not? Is my time valuable enough for me to spend it at the church? Even people who didn't go to church, believe that there is a God, even though they didn't attend the local congregation. There is a God. There's a Father, and the Son was Jesus, and He died for our sins. This was widely believed in this era. So what are the 3 C's? Right here, you start with Christ. The second one is community, and the third one is cause. C-A-U-S-E. So this is the pattern that people follow. Number 1, I'm going to share Christ with you. Come to the crusade. There's an invitation to accept Christ. When you accept Christ, this is first. You go into a community of believers where they will help you understand some biblical doctrine. And then, if the church had a cause, they would join it. Like, I'm going to use my gifts. I'm going to help the community. I'm going to feed the poor. Are you following what I'm saying so far? That's the pattern with the big crusades. In our denomination, it's Mark Finley and Alejandro Guillon. It's like huge events where lots of people went to. 1980s started a trend called personal evangelism, where we're like, we're gonna get away from big events. Now it's gonna be like personal, right? I want to make friends with my neighbor. I want to talk to people about God. I want to share with them some principle. So the 3 C's now change. Instead of immediately starting with Christ, I start with community. I want to bring you into community. I want you to belong before you believe. I want to come to my house. I want you to be my friend. I'm going to study the Bible in a small group, and then I'm going to introduce you to Christ. But activity in the community, human trafficking, hunger, health, homelessness, is over here. Once you are in the club, then you can help us with whatever it is that we're doing. This is what happened 1980s to 2010. 2010, in North America, starts a phenomenon called the rise of the nuns. N-O-N-E-S. Not nuns like the flying nun, nuns like nun. Who are these, and what is the start in 2010? What happened in 2010? What happens every 10 years?
Census.
There's a census. So every other census that had in the United States, when you ask the question, what religion are you? The nuns, I have no religion, or 5 to 7%. This is the first time there was over 10. By 2070, the last thing that came out, nuns are going to be the majority in North America. right now is 30%. So it's 1 out of 3. And people under 40 is 50%. So how do you reach the nuns? Because nuns are different than unchurched. Anybody guess what the difference between the two is? What's the difference between a nun and a person who is an unchurched person? Neither of them go to church, by the way. So what's the difference between this one and this one?
Never went to church.
Huh?
They never went to church.
Never went to church. Or these are de-churched people who had bad experiences, who saw religion and politics get mixed together, who saw the hypocrisy of a generation that insisted in certain particular beliefs, but got divorced at a higher rate than any other generation, saw the hypocrisy in the church and out of church, and they're like, I want nothing to do with it. The difference between these two, these people have a general positive perspective on the church. The nuns do not. You started the game down 10 points. You started the soccer match, anybody soccer fans here? Started the soccer match 2-0 against you. It's not 0-0. Right? These people, they are already prejudiced against church people. They look at you with suspicion. They think you're homophobic. This is not a reality. But perception is reality. It doesn't matter if you're not a homophobic. If you're not homophobic, they believe you are. If you're homophobic, you believe that you want to oppress people, they believe that you are necessarily a Republican, they believe some things that are about some cartoonish, and you might not be any of it, but this is what they believe. So if you start a nun with the first C, what was the first C over here? Christ. Where's Christ here? In the center. So if you start off Christ, if you start talking religion with a nun, what kind of reception do you think you have? Whoa. That works for you. But I'm just chilling here. I'm like spiritual, but not religious. I don't want to, like church buildings and stuff, like give me anxiety. I don't want anything to do. So if you start with Christ, with these people, you have an immediate block. So where do you start with them? How do you reach nuns? You start with this C. You start with cause. You're like, hey, this is what we're doing in our community. This is how the 5 H's, right? The 5 H's are hunger, homelessness, human trafficking, health, and help. That's where you start. So when you start with what you're doing in the community, then it opens up from the nuns. It opens up lines of conversation. Then, what's the second C? Let's build a community. Let's have a conversation about the Bible. Now they're open because they know you. They're like, okay, you're not like the caricature of Christians that I see on TV. I met a real one. Did you know that 87% of these people say they don't have one single friend who is a Christian? Talking about not just people they work with. I'm talking about friends, like deep. I don't have a deep friendship with a Christian. So of course, if they don't know any, all the idea they're going to have of what Christians are is what they see on TV. But this is not on them because they're not missionaries to us. We're missionaries to them. Like how many nuns do you know that are in your inner circle? Because in order to know a nun, you have to be uncomfortable. See, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow in the morning. I've never met a church that says we don't want lost people here. We don't want lost people here. I've never met a church like that. The question is, what level of lostness are you comfortable with? Because their habits and their beliefs and their lifestyle is completely different from biblical lifestyle, worldview, completely different. But they are not missionaries. We are. So when I go in a mission field, I don't ask, if I were to go to China, I don't ask the people I'm trying to reach to speak Spanish. Like I try to learn their language. So what's their language? So this is today. So that's why all across the United States, churches that used to have 1,000 attendance have 150 now. Because we've held on, we've made nostalgia our driving force. And nostalgia is not a church growth strategy. This is how we used to do it. This is what we used to do. So, these two things, 4 minutes ago, and I'm going to tell you a story and I'm going to end. These two things you have to hold in tension. You have to hold in tension Jesus and justice. And for some of you, that's uncomfortable because it forces you to come out of your comfort zone. But I left all that behind. Why would I want to go back to that? Well, just people that Jesus died for. And that's some of your sons and daughters and grandkids who used to be in Pathfinders and used to be in Adventurers and used to be in Academy and no longer attend and don't consider themselves religious anymore. That's where my parents go. So just falling back and saying, well, I guess, they can't handle the straight testimony. Isn't that? Or is there something that we can do? So these two things that you have to hold in tension. The second and last one, and I'll tell you the story on this one, is this. When I wrote down two phrases. When is the right moment? The right moment versus right now. When is the right moment to tell somebody about God? In this story that we're reading today, Paul told the guy in the jail about God at the worst possible time. He shared Jesus with them like at midnight. Like at midnight was a earthquake. So they're having a Bible study at 1:30 in the morning. Some of you are falling asleep. It's like 7 o'clock. These people are like 1:30 in the morning. They're trying to. It wasn't the right time. Just an earthquake had just happened. Like the dude has lost his job. If you talk about right time, when is the right time? So when do I share Christ? Right now or the right time? When's the right time? So every time we talk about, these three things, when do we tell people about Jesus? When is it appropriate to share the gospel with people? Do we just make them healthy sinners and never talk to them about Jesus? Do we just, the first time it's like, hey, here's this bag of food, but remember, you have to come here in order to get it. When is the right time? I'll tell you this story. That's going to wrap everything up, and then Kathy's going to come and tell us about the organization and logistics of what we're trying to do. We've been married 30 years. This August was the 30-year anniversary. It's fantastic. Thank you very much. I appreciate the affirmation for her. It's fantastic. 30 years. And she says, Roger, you can hug me and kiss me anytime you want, except for 2 times. Number 1, don't hug me or kiss me when I'm cleaning the house. Less hugs and more help is the way she put it, right? Less hugs and more help. And number 2, when I'm exercising, don't hug me when I'm exercising. I'm sweaty, don't want to be hugged. So I was like, all right. So I'm sitting next to her. She's working out. She's doing P90X. If you don't know what P90X, don't try to do it. If you know what P90X, you've probably been injured doing it. She's doing P90X in the hotel room. I'm sitting down. I already finished my workout. I'm sitting down, close proximity. But I'm not hugging. I didn't show her articles from the internet about the benefits of hugs and that you need 7 hugs a day. Do you want to be a good person? Here, look what the data says. Look. And I didn't bombard her with data and facts. I just respected her wishes, but I stayed close by. And she's doing these things that you have to do, like scissor kicks and jump from one side or the other. And all of a sudden, I heard it. It went pop. She was jumping from one leg to the other leg, and she jumped wrong, and I heard the ankle. I heard it pop. She dropped to the ground, became clammy, white, and she could not even talk. Immediately she starts crying. So what do I do? What do I do?
I'm not supposed to.
Oh, I'm not supposed to hug you. I'm not supposed to hug you. I'm going to respect your wishes. I get down and I start hugging her, and she did not protest. She didn't tell me, haven't I told you that you're not supposed to hug me? Haven't I made it absolutely clear that you're not supposed to hug me? Come on, Roger, I've told you many times before. Please respect my wishes. She said nothing of the sort. I hugged her, I kissed her, I grabbed her, I put her on the sofa, I got some ice, I took her to the doctor, I wheeled her around in airports for the next 2 weeks. I took care of my wife, and she did not mind at all. Why? So here's the application as it has to do with evangelism. Stay close to people until you hear a pop. Once. And when I hear a pop, and sometimes a pop takes years to happen, but I'm playing the long run. Evangelism takes time. There's no easy microwave way of like, well, here's this text and here's this sermon, and people, voila, I want Jesus in my life. Sometimes it takes years. Sometimes it takes months. Sometimes it takes decades. But I'm engaged, and I want for them what God has blessed me with. Like how selfish would I have to be to believe that God is real, and heaven is real, and the Bible is real, and the promises of God is real, and the peace of God is real, and the blessings of God are real. How selfish would I have to be to keep all that to myself and never share with anybody? I am convinced that Christianity that does not work for you is not shareable to anybody else. And we're going to be better sharers when it works for us. When we see a tangible difference in following Jesus, you're going to be more likely to stay around people, and when you hear pops, you hug, and you bless, and you help. And that's what we're going to do. October, when I come back, I'm going to talk for 4 nights, 5 messages, including Saturday morning. I'm going to talk about hope. I'm going to pray that we'll have some of these, and some of these, and they'll get to see the Jesus, not that they told them on the 24 hours cable channel, but the real Jesus, the Jesus that changed your life. All right? Stay close to people until you hear a pop, Kathy.